My dad suddenly collapsed and had to be rushed to the hospital. I need to be with him, so our honeymoon is off, at least for me. You'll have to go without me. In an instant, the honeymoon I had been eagerly looking forward to was cancelled. My husband insists I go alone, but who ever heard of going on a honeymoon solo? Then, someone appeared before me, and I felt my legs go weak. It was my father-in-law, the very man who was supposed to be in the hospital. Father-in-law, what are you doing here? My name is Sarah, and I've been with Mark for 5 years. This summer, he finally proposed. Looking back, those 5 years seemed like an eternity. After about a year of dating, we began visiting each other's families. Mark met my parents, who lived out of town, and I became close with his, but Mark kept saying, "We'll get married once things settle at work," without making any firm plans. Eventually, he even started joking, "Why don't we just stay like this?" That was when I began to worry. "Mark, I'm turning 30. If you're not serious about this, we should go our separate ways." After that, Mark finally proposed. We were already close with each other's families and had discussed everything, from the wedding details to the honeymoon destination. All that remained was to follow through. We planned a small ceremony with only our closest friends and family. The only thing left to look forward to was our honeymoon. Mark spent the day before our departure at his parents' house. I had dinner with my parents, who had traveled from out of town, and then returned home alone. I double-checked our luggage and sent Mark a message before going to bed. "Mark, you were amazing today. I'm all set for our honeymoon tomorrow. I can't wait for our trip to Italy." But I didn't get a response. I figured he must have been exhausted from the wedding. I just hoped he wouldn't oversleep and miss our flight. With that slight worry, I eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I was jolted awake by a call from Mark. "Sarah, something awful has happened," he said, his words tumbling out in a rush. "My dad collapsed, and he's been taken to the hospital. You'll have to go on our honeymoon alone today." "What? What are you talking about?" I blurted out, completely confused. "But your dad seemed perfectly healthy at the wedding yesterday, didn't he?" "I know, Sarah, I'm just as shocked. I'm staying with him, but you should go ahead without me." "That's ridiculous. If your dad is sick, there's no way I can go on the honeymoon. Who would go alone?" I asked him which hospital his father had been taken to, but Mark refused to tell me. "If I tell you, you'll come here, won't you?" "Of course I would. Your dad knows how much this trip means to us. He insisted that I let you go. Please, respect his wishes." "How can I enjoy the trip knowing all this? Are you planning to join me once things improve?" "Yes, I'll come as soon as things are under control." "Under control? Don't say, under control, like that. It sounds like you're jinxing it. Please, let me take care of things here. Go to Italy as planned. I'm almost at the hospital, so I won't be able to answer your calls. We'll talk later." "Wait, Mark," I called out, but he abruptly hung up before I could say anything more. I immediately tried calling him back, but it seemed his phone was already turned off. With no way to reach him and no idea which hospital his father was taken to, I felt completely powerless. As I stood there, trying to process what had just happened, the doorbell suddenly rang. When I opened the door, my legs nearly gave out beneath me. Father-in-law. There, standing on the doorstep, was my father-in-law, the very man who was supposedly rushed to the hospital in an emergency. "Your legs, they're fine. I'm so relieved." "Huh, what are you talking about?" He looked at me with a puzzled expression as I tried to make sense of what I was seeing. "Are you feeling okay?" Well, I was worried because Mark said you were taken to the hospital, but you seem perfectly fine." "Oh, that? I might have had a bit too much to drink at the wedding yesterday, but I felt great when I woke up this morning. I'm definitely sober now. I even drove here to pick you up after dropping Mark off." "Wait, you dropped Mark off?" "Yeah, you two are going on your honeymoon, right?" "I took him to the station, but then I realized I should come and pick you up too. Let me take you to LaGuardia." I was completely bewildered. The father-in-law who was supposed to be in the hospital was standing right in front of me, and Mark, who claimed to be at his side, had instead been dropped off at a station. None of it made any sense. Then, something clicked. My father-in-law mentioned LaGuardia, but if we were going to Italy, we should be heading to JFK, not LaGuardia Airport. "Wait, you said LaGuardia, but our honeymoon is in Italy." "Yeah, I thought so too, But Mark told me this morning that there was a last-minute change of plans. He said you two decided to go to Alaska instead. Alaska? The more I heard, the more confused I became. Mark said we're going to Alaska. Yes, that's right. He even left a note in the car. My father-in-law pulled out a small post-it from the back seat. It had the name of an inn in Alaska and a flight from LaGuardia to Ted Stevens Anchorage International Airport written on it. As I stared at the note, everything started to fall into place. Could you please take me to LaGuardia after all? Of course, traffic shouldn't be too bad. We'll probably get there around the same time as Mark's train. Thank you so much. As we drove, I couldn't stop thinking about Mark's behavior. Whether my suspicions were right would soon be clear once I found him at the airport. I thanked my father-in-law and headed into the airport. Near the check-in counter for the flight mentioned on the post-it, I spotted Mark immediately. He was with a young woman, their arms linked, casually selecting drinks together. It was exactly as I feared. He had been cheating on me all along. The affair must have started while we were still living together. His reluctance to marry was probably because of her. And now, not only had he been unfaithful, but he was taking his mistress on a trip the day of our supposed honeymoon. I stepped directly in front of him, my heart pounding with anger. Mark, about to exit the store with their drinks, froze when he saw me. His mouth fell open. Sarah, what are you doing here? I could ask you the same. Why are you here, Mark? Weren't you supposed to be at the hospital with your father? I just came to pick up some things. Shopping? You came all the way to LaGuardia just to buy a bottle of water? Yeah, Dad was really insistent on getting some airport water. That's interesting because I just saw your father. He came to pick me up himself, and he looked perfectly fine. What? Oh, right, after our call, he suddenly felt better. His resilience always amazes me. Mark was desperately trying to keep his story together. As I stood there, a mix of disbelief and anger washed over me. I wanted to see just how far he'd go with his lies. So, who is this woman, and where exactly were you planning to go? Well, she's the nurse who was taking care of Dad. We're on our way to check out a rehabilitation facility for him in Alaska. His excuse was so absurd that I couldn't help but sigh in exasperation. Enough, your ridiculous lies are giving me a headache. I'm not lying, Mark insisted, but by then, his words were meaningless. She's really Mark's words were abruptly cut off by a voice from behind. My what? I turned around to see my father-in-law standing there. Father-in-law, I thought you had gone home. I sensed something was off with you, Sarah, so I parked the car and followed you. Looks like I made the right call. With his father now present, Mark's attempts at lying began to crumble, and he grew visibly anxious. Noticing his son's suspicious behavior, my father-in-law asked sternly, So, who is this woman? Well, Mark stammered, struggling to come up with an answer, but before he could say anything further, the woman beside him spoke up. I'm Amy, Mark's girlfriend. Mark quickly tried to cover her mouth. Hey, what are you doing? You need to be honest, Mark, you don't love your wife, just divorce her already. What? No. Stop talking. Why should I? You promised me you'd leave her. Isn't that why you chose to come with me today instead of going on your honeymoon? That's only because you threatened to expose our relationship if I didn't go to Alaska with you. I see, I said coldly. So you've been having an affair with this woman? Amy shot me a defiant look. It's not an affair. Mark and I are serious about each other. He never wanted to marry you. By this point, I was too drained to argue. Fine. Do whatever you want. Without another word, I turned and left the airport with my father-in-law. 5 days later, Mark returned home. The doorbell rang, and I spoke to him through the intercom. Sarah, I can't unlock the door. Can you open it for me? Oh, about that, I changed the locks. You changed the locks? Why would you do that without telling me? I don't feel comfortable with a stranger having a key to my home. A stranger? Are you talking about me? Who else? The divorce papers are ready, so just sign them and be done with it. Wait a minute, let me in first, and we can talk this over. I kept the door chain on and slipped the divorce papers through the small gap. There's nothing left to discuss. Once you sign the papers, Please leave immediately. Don't be so hasty. I've decided to break up with Amy. Huh, what are you talking about? Well, she was awful. I agreed to go to Alaska because she threatened to expose our affair, but all she did was complain about the inn being outdated and the weather being terrible. I told her clearly, I have no intention of divorcing my wife. Please end things with me. That's irrelevant to me. The only thing I care about now is getting a divorce, even if you don't want it. Don't say that. Are you upset because we didn't go to Italy? It's a bit late, but should we still go? Are you out of your mind? How could you even suggest that? I was foolish to think a reasonable conversation was possible. A man who cancels his honeymoon to be with his mistress isn't thinking rationally. Sign the divorce papers right now, and also sign this document. I passed him another document through the crack. What's this document? It was prepared by my lawyer while he was away. It outlined the alimony payments and the cancellation fee for our honeymoon. Why should I pay alimony? You're the one who wants the divorce. I'm trying to make things right. You're ignoring basic common sense. Infidelity has consequences, including alimony. The decision to reconcile isn't yours to make since you're the one who cheated. And about the cancellation fee? We didn't get a refund because we canceled the trip on the day of departure. Since your actions led to the cancellation, it's only fair that you cover the cost. I told you to go alone. Not going was your choice. How could I possibly go on a honeymoon alone? Besides, you lied about your father being ill to cover up your affair. There was no way I could go under those circumstances. Well, I really wanted to go to Italy with you too, but Amy threatened me, and I had no choice. You wouldn't want your husband to lose his job because of an exposure at work, would you? She threatened to expose you at work? Yes, she did. If Amy says she'll do something, she will. It's all her fault. I had to admit, Amy did seem the type who might act on her threats, given her boldness in declaring, I'm his girlfriend. To me, she clearly wasn't one to be underestimated. In fact, with Amy around, Mark was likely to self-destruct on his own. I just needed to get him to sign the divorce papers. Feigning concern, I asked, are you sure it's okay for you to be here? What do you mean? You broke up with Amy, right? Wasn't she upset? Of course she was angry, but I'm done with her. You might be fine, but what about Amy? With her personality, I wouldn't be surprised if she shows up at your office and exposes you. That would be a disaster. I need to get to the office and stop her. Sarah, please pass me my company key card. This one. I held up Mark's company key card, which I had taken from his drawer. Yes, that's the one. I quickly pulled back as he tried to grab it through the door chain. I'll give you the key card in exchange for your signature on the divorce papers and the payment agreement. Mark hesitated for a moment but then agreed. Have you decided? You'd better hurry, Amy might beat you to the office. All right, I'll sign. With reluctance, Mark signed the documents and slid them through the gap. Here, this should be good, right? Now give me the key card. I handed over the key card, and Mark hurried off towards the office. I went to the courthouse to file the divorce papers and handed the signed payment agreement to my lawyer. At least the financial matters were settled. The next day, I received a frantic call from Mark. Hello. Ah, Sarah. What do you want? We're legally strangers now. We have nothing to discuss. Wait, don't hang up, Mark pleaded desperately. Feeling a bit curious about what happened, I decided to listen to his side of the story. So, what do you want now? I was called in by the board as soon as I got to the office today. Everyone knows about the affair, even though I got ahead of Amy. Isn't that strange? Oh, that's because I told them. What? You told the board? Yes, and not just them, I informed everyone at your office. I felt it was only fair to explain why we got divorced so quickly after our wedding. You seemed preoccupied with Amy, so I thought it was better to be honest with our guests. Guests? You told everyone? Yes, when I explained that you preferred a vacation over our honeymoon, everyone was appalled. But how am I supposed to face everyone at work now? You don't need to hide your true self anymore, isn't that a relief? Huh, are you kidding me? You've ruined my life. I should be the one saying that. I wish I could take back the 5 years I wasted on someone like you. When I raised my voice, Mark had no response. Why don't you just be with Amy, if she cares for you so much? Wouldn't she support you even if you lose your job? Absolutely not. Nothing good comes from being with her. You're the only one who can support me, Sarah. Well, nothing good comes from being with you either. If you want support, you should start considering other people's feelings before acting. I genuinely regret it. Can't we try again? Trying again isn't an option. The damage is done. No chance. How about you reflect, turn over a new leaf, and start fresh, maybe even find a job first? Sarah, don't abandon me. You're the one who betrayed me. You'll just have to live with the consequences. I ended the call abruptly. After that, Mark returned to his parents' house a few times, trying to borrow money. However, my father-in-law, who had been falsely portrayed as gravely ill to cover up Mark's affair, was outraged. Eventually, he severed ties with Mark. Mark found the atmosphere at his company increasingly uncomfortable and ended up quitting his job. Job hunting proved difficult, and he's been barely scraping by with a part-time job at a convenience store. As for me, I used the alimony to move into a new home. Despite changing the locks, I felt uneasy living in a place my ex-husband knew about. Mark's parents helped with the move, perhaps as a way to make amends for their son's actions. We still keep in touch and share occasional meals. While I can't reclaim the 5 years spent with Mark, I'm looking forward to finding someone better in the future.